today to kind of listen and see what you guys are about, because I'm curious to see what 2.0 is going to be about. And I specifically am looking at how to make a registry for a event producer or consumer. And the scope is not necessarily pointed at a queue, but it's a function or it's an entity that is going to either consume or produce events. And these will, at the moment, they're going to be cloud events. And so I'm curious to see if AsyncAPI could be a good fit for maybe cloud events and not necessarily queues, but these consumers and producers. So that's why I'm here.
Cool, thanks, and welcome, by the way. So yes, we will discuss this later if you don't mind, or if you're in a hurry, we can just change the order of the agenda, the mini agenda that we have for today. So one thing that I wanted to discuss today is about, well, actually, we already started the conversation, right? For people that were not today in the meeting. Now that we're recording, so I'm repeating a little bit. So we're creating a parser, the AsyncAPI 2 parser in Golang, and we're facing some problems. Like we have objects. We have schemas that can be of multiple types, like those specified with one of or any of, and we don't know how to merge or how to make it work, right? Like if an object, if a property can be of type object and type Boolean, for instance, how do we solve this problem, right?
So in Go, those two types are. There's no such thing as a primitive in Go. They're all interface.
Interface, yeah, exactly.
And so the way you do this is you'd have an object that has a field that is an interface, but it's a concrete type of something real, like a Boolean or an object. And then when you serialize it, the object itself knows how to be serialized. So
Okay.
that all works out. And where it comes into trouble is when you're trying to consume it on the programming side. You actually have to inspect it and try to shove it into a certain type.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not a simple problem. Your parser would have to understand how to assemble the final result, understanding what's expected for this instance of that object. So it would produce a Boolean, shove it into that field. It would still serialize fine, but it's going to be a lot of work to assemble that object, and not very easy to consume it either.
Was there a reason that we picked Go from the beginning?
Sorry, say again.
Yeah, sorry, it's Jonathan. I was just curious, what was the rationale for using Go versus, as an example, it seemed like AsyncAPI Swagger tooling uses Java kind of for their framework.
Okay. Yeah. So the reason was that Go compiles really well to C libraries, right? And we can then reuse these C libraries in other languages. So if we want to have tooling for multiple languages, it's easier to export it to a C library and then create wrappers on those languages, right? Wrappers of the C library, because all the languages support C libraries or wrapping C libraries. So Mike suggested having doing it in Rust because it creates much better. You did something that I couldn't see it. So it creates much smaller binaries, but yeah, I mean, so I think that the community for Go is much bigger, so it will be easier for us to find people that knows how to deal with Go. Of course, we will try to contribute to Rust and create probably some of the modules can be done in Rust. We don't have to do everything in Go, right? If we're gonna use C libraries, we can do whatever we want, right? As long as it compiles to C, it's fine. So that was the main rationale. that makes sense?
Yeah, I think somewhat. I think I'll get with you offline later to make sure I fully understand, since I missed the last meeting and I don't want you to have to rehash probably what you've already talked about. So.
Yes, and the reason we did that is that taking into account our resources, that we are very few people, we cannot think about creating the same tooling, the same parser in different languages, repeating the same work, and then maintaining all those libraries, right? It might change in the future. I mean, if we keep growing and we get more resources and more people working on AsyncAPI, obviously I would be happy to say, hey, let's get rid of these C libraries, intermediaries, and that's it. And then let's do it natively in each language. That would be awesome. But for 4 or 5 people working on the project from time to time, this is it will be impossible to manage. Basically, that was the reason. So yeah, and regarding plans, so regarding plans for the tooling, not just for the parser. Tomorrow I'm gonna have a meeting with Lucas from Kima, because they are the ones who created the AsyncAPI React component. So to discuss how they're gonna implement the next React component or the version 2 parser for the browser, if at all, because maybe we don't implement a browser version. But I would like to know your opinion on that. Like, what about parsing in the browser? Because we cannot parse in the browser with a Golang library, right? Mike suggested with Rust that Rust compiles to WebAssembly, but honestly, I know nothing about it. So
there has to be a way for doing something similar with Go, right?
With what? Sorry.
To create a WebAssembly from Go. There has to be.
I haven't looked at it.
I mean, I think that would be ideal, right? Because the other case would be to duplicate the parser for the editor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is some experimental support for Golang to WebAssembly, but I don't think it's quite as far as advanced as the Rust toolchain. But it's obviously developing, so it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I took a look at one article. Yeah, it seems that everything started with Rust, right? From Mozilla and other companies working on this, working with Rust. So we had the biggest support with Rust.
So the other option is not having a browser version parser at all. Like if you want to parse a document, you parse it on the server and return a JSON schema document, the result of the parsing, let's say, right? That's the other option. And I think from the last comments with Lucas from SAP, right? They were fine. Like if they have to, if they are already doing it, and actually they are already doing it in Go. So in the server side, so it's fine. It will be fine for them. But obviously, if we can have something that can parse on the browser, that will be amazing. But with restricted features, like you cannot access the file system, obviously, but you just enter URLs or strings, and it will resolve, right? But I'm not sure, for instance, the support for instance, translating, that complicated things, like translating protobuf to JSON schema. That we should have this working on the browser as well, right? If we want to have a full parser on the browser, we will have to translate all these things in the browser, from Avro to JSON schema, from protobuf to JSON schema, from any other schema, right, to JSON schema. and that's will all work in the browser. So that I don't know. I don't know if that's at all possible, right? Like, if not just language-wise, because we can translate to WebAssembly, supposing that we can do it, but I don't know if these languages are using some features like, I don't know, integers, 64-bit integers or something like that, that are not available in the browser or something like that, whatever, right? Not sure. So that this, so probably we should just focus on having something good for the server, and whoever wants to parse the document will have to parse it on the server and just get a JSON schema document in the response, and this JSON schema document will be used by the documentation renderers to render the documentation, right? That's another alternative of having everything on the browser. What do you think about it?
Это будет быстро. Папа, это будет быстро.
Sorry? I think. Are you speaking? Honor, Zoom spam? Okay, probably, yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. It's good to know. I didn't know that we will have this kind of spam in Zoom. Amazing. Welcome to the public meetings. Okay, so I will say, what do you think about it? Like about not having browser a client-based parser or a browser-based parser?
Well, I think that would be the easiest solution for now, to continue the same route, right? Doing most of the work on the back end, because if no, basically we need to redo all the editor, right?
Well, no. The editor is working. It's parsing on the back end. The editor is actually is just returning the HTML from the server and rendering what's the server response. So it's not working on the client.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If we want to do it on the client, we'll need to redo a lot of work right now.
Oh, yes, but if we don't do it, then Lucas and the Kima team will have to do it like they are doing it in the front end. So we have both cases, right? They're doing it right now in the front end.
Okay, so I thought they were doing it on the back end too.
No, they are already parsing AsyncAPI documents on the back end, but for different purpose. Not for the documentation, but they already have the code, so it will not be a problem for them, I guess. I'll check tomorrow with them, no worries. So and regarding plans, so what do you think next steps for should be for that? I think I've been working on breaking down the parser work into some chunks, smaller chunks, so we can work on them, right? But since we're new to Go, we've been experimenting a lot and not working on this task yet. But and I want to put an emphasis that this is just for the parser, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we should focus on the parser first. And then once we have the parser really working well, we can then create other tooling like documentation generators or code generators or other stuff, right? Because all of them will use the parser. So I feel like I'm repeating myself. So yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but if I know that you might feel right now that things are a little bit stopped or stuck because we are working at the same time in the version 2 spec and on the tooling, but we're experimenting at the same time on both, right? And it's like, how do we move forward, right? So how do we move forward? My answer here will be let's keep working like that, like we're doing right now. We are in a very strange area right now where we don't have the version 2 spec yet finished, although it's almost there, but it's not yet finished. And we're experimenting with a new language. So for something crucial as a parser, like a parser, right? And we're experimenting on a new language. So I will keep going like that for at least 2 more weeks or 3 more weeks. And then I'll just, or even during these weeks, what I can do, if you think it's okay, we can, I can split the work in tasks and have a vision of what we have to do in order to have a full parser working, right? Or a parser fully working, not a full parser. A parser fully working, it might be not necessarily with all the features, with all the things that we would like to have. Like we will have the skate instead of a car, right? But you can do something at least with it. So what do you think about it? Like I'll create this task, or if you want to sit down and work on that, on breaking the whole plan in small chunks that anybody can pick and work on this. I'm happy to let you do it.
But I thought we had that.
No. I mean, I'm what we have is it's a plan. Yeah, it might be confusing, but we have a plan on the vision. But I want to have actionables, right? Like tasks, something that you pick and you complete and it's done, right? Something small. What we have is a very broad vision, right? It's a very broad vision right now on what it should be. I want smaller things, like things that you can solve in an afternoon, maybe, right? Smaller chunks.
Okay, because we already have the high level components, right? For the parser, we, I mean the plan that you created and the like somehow the architecture, right? With all those different components of the parser.
Yeah,
you're saying to refine even more that and create more specific tasks, right?
Yeah, and the reason I'm saying that is because that helps people to collaborate. Basically, it's like we're gonna collaborate. We even have to wait we even have to expect new people to join the team in the middle of the work, right? While we are doing something like, hey, it should be really easy to say, hey, just go to this issue list here and just pick one and solve it, right? But it should be very specific and very small, very easy to solve, right? Very limited scope, and something that might take you one day at most, right? Not so much. And I'm sure that it's always possible, but just in case, I'm gonna say that it should always, it should at least be, the issues should be independent, so they don't block each other, right? If we split the work, we cannot have. I know that what we have right now is the in the GitHub issues on the parcel repo, we have a few tasks there that they are interdependent, but we'd like to see something really that's not that we don't have. So we don't have dependencies basically between the tasks, because that that prevents people blocking other people, right? So that's what I was saying is I can work on that if you want. I can do it. I already have experience doing it, so it's fine for me. But if you want to collaborate and do it yourself, or propose an idea on how to do it, or wherever you prefer, I'm happy to delegate this. I'm happy. Not every collaboration is code wise, right? Sometimes it's just managing work, right? It's just about that. So yeah, what do you think? Anybody wants to?
Yeah, I think it would probably be beneficial if it is your breakdown of the high level concepts and the high level areas that you outlined before, because there's probably already things that you've thought through at that lower level that we could do with having in a formal document with all those tasks broken down, I think. So if you don't mind doing the work, then
no. Actually, no, I don't mind. It's fair point. I mean, I don't mind. I'm just saying that because I'm working on other things at the same time. You know, sometimes these things might take time to be completed on my side. You know, because as you know, I'm also looking for sponsors and writing articles, you know, doing the social media stuff, like publishing like hell, always scheduling tweets, you know, all these things, and sometimes encoding and then AsyncAPI 2, the spec, right? I mean, it's fine. I can do it, right? But then spec like at least 1 or 2 weeks until I have it completed, right? If that's okay for you, right? So yeah, I'll take care of it. No worries.
So on the part of the parser that's being generated, is that the structures for the specification based on the specification schema? Like you started with the info object, and I think Raisel did the service object, but the rest would be automatically generated to some degree.
It is already automatically generated.
Okay, cool. And is that where you're hitting the problems with one of and any of?
It's not because of the generator. We will have the same problem even if we don't use the generator. Yeah.
What I was thinking is maybe, I think like Scott was saying, where you've got a Boolean and an object, and it's a one of or an any of, you could represent that as both the Boolean and the object, and a kind of artificial field, which would act like a discriminator to say which one is active.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's a little bit ugly, but it would allow you to represent, and you just have to if then based on the value of that discriminator property. And I think we can eliminate the case of where it's a reference or a real object if we move the dereferencing sort of earlier in the parser stage. So we eliminate all the refs first.
But that might not be possible.
Okay.
I thought you can't remove refs because of loops.
It's only circular references you'd have.
Yeah, if you have circular references, you might not be able to get rid of all of them.
But they would only exist within schema objects.
Sorry, say again?
They would only exist within schema objects.
Yeah.
So it's a special case because we're deferring the schema to later in the process anyway, aren't we?
Yes, exactly. We're deferring schema later in the process because it might not use our schema language.
Exactly, yeah.
It might use protobuf or Avro or whatever else.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's a good point. And then we can make it clear in the spec that that it's forbidden to create, circular references outside the schema, right? Like outside in your own document, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's anywhere it'd be possible except inside a schema object.
Mm. Yeah, most probably, yeah. Now, to be honest, I never had this problem with circular references outside schema. I've never seen it. Like inside schema makes sense because like the typical use case of you have a person with friends, right? And then each friend is a person, so with friends and all of that. So yeah. Okay, That's a good idea. We can have this kind of this idea of having a discriminator. I think it's a good idea. Maybe I mean, happy. I can explore it, or if you want to explore it, I mean, just let's do something. I'm gonna create all these things, a list of tasks, let's say, or issues, or whatever we want to call it, and then we just each of us just pick one and work on it, like we were just saying. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just pick something that's very simple to start with, so I can start learning Go. So
no, it's the same for me. I'm just picking small stuff, right? Like I'm just exploring, because I mean, like 1 month ago, I knew almost anything about Go, so almost nothing. So yeah, cool. So Nichols, you wanted to can you refresh this, because I don't recall.
Yeah. Hi. It sounds like you guys are doing a lot of work.
Yes.
Cool. So the particular problem I have right now is I need a way for eventing producers to describe the schema that they will produce. And they happen to be producing cloud events.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not targeted toward a particular queue. It's not like I can describe what a queue will output. It's an entity, which could be a queue or it could be just an object.
Mm-hmm.
So my world is constrained to, usually it's Golang, Kubernetes, and serverless.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, if you collect all the schemas from all the producers on a particular cluster, you might get something that looks like a registry. And then you could take a look at that registry and create a function that consumes a particular output of a particular source, or maybe a set of sources that's the same type. And the ultimate dream would be to ask that registry for the shell of what that function is. And then you fill out what the work it actually is doing, and then you upload that back up to the cloud, and now you have a serverless function that's operating just on the chunk of code that you had to write, but you've gathered all the metadata from the registry. And I'm looking at ways to power this idea, and AsyncAPI seems to be fairly close with maybe some tweaks.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if there's interest.
Yeah, I think what you're interested in, it's something that we're gonna work on the next milestone for version 2, and it's called protocol mappers. So so the idea behind protocol mappers is to have information about the protocol, like what you said, like queues or exchanges, or like in AMQP, for instance, they have exchanges, or partitions for Kafka, or whatever, this kind of information that you need for a specific protocol, and that is not used across all the protocols and messaging protocols, right? So yeah, this information will be possible to be described on the next version. And just to close the loop, the new parser will also implement a way to validate all these little things on the protocol mappers, right? On this information, so people will be able to create just a small parser if you want, or a JSON schema document specifying how the information should look there. We will take this JSON schema, this little JSON schema, and we will validate against it. So that's extensible, right? Like anybody can create any protocol mapper or any map for a specific protocol if you want. Like if you have, for instance, your custom protocol at Google, and you want to use it, you should be able to do it as well. You just provide the definition to the AsyncAPI parser, and it will just parse it. So it's just to close the loop, right? Like so it's gonna be supported. You will have this kind of information in the document. You will have not only the ID of the producer, which, if I don't mind, if I don't remember, if I remember correctly, I think it was a conversation with you or something that you said on the Knative channel, which brought me to the idea of putting an ID to the whole document, right? Because the whole document represents an application, a specific application.
Are you talking about the conversation with me and Doug? We're talking about the
probably. I don't recall. Yeah, probably. To be honest, I don't remember.
Does this group have a Slack?
I think. Sorry, it's Jonathan. Jonathan is sending me. I thought it was you. Sorry, I was saying. I thought I saw it on Knative or probably on the Cloud Events side. I don't remember. Yeah. So the idea was to have an ID to represent the application. So producers now have an ID, right, and consumers as well. So eventually you can create this registry. Like you can have you can, from all these async API documents, you could generate that registry with the ID, with the messages it published, the messages it consumed, the protocol details you need to fulfill in order to consume or to produce, and all this, all this information, and like topics, if there are at all, and this kind of information.
That sounds really cool. So I think next steps will be for me to maybe pull down your work in progress stuff and see what's up.
Yeah, I mean, we can have a chat later if you want, and I can explain where we are and where we're going.
Cool.
Right.
Yeah, great. It's pretty cool.
Perfect. So anyone else has questions regarding work, regarding the spec, regarding anything? All good? I can't believe. Now you will be complaining in private.
I was about to say, oh, I've got questions, but yeah, well, like I said, we'll chat afterwards on some of mine.
Okay, but your case is special, Jonathan, because you are in the middle of a mess already in the airport.
Yeah. And most people call me always special, so it all makes sense.
Perfect. Cool. So yeah, summarizing a little bit the last 2 weeks, I would like to tell you that so funding, like having sponsors, basically, it's moving forward and it's looking really good. So yeah, I will update probably on the next meeting. I will update with more information as soon as I have permission. So, okay. So yeah, anything else you want to comment out? Now we're exchanging messages here. Sorry, you were asking for Slack. I thought you were telling me that if we talk in Slack. Thanks, Mike. Sometimes my English is not so good. Cool. So thank you, and let's keep chatting on the channel. Like, let's not just let's not wait for these meetings to happen. Okay, let's try to collaborate asynchronously. And yeah. Thanks, and have a good day. Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.